Hello. Hello, police. Yeah, what's the problem, sir? We just drove down our farm track. Yeah. Go and feed our pheasants. We come across a Range Rover with 3 people in it. Yeah. It appears that they're dead. I don't know what's happening. Blood in the motor all over them.
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case, or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. And in this video, I'll be discussing the possibility that Tony Tucker exited the Range Rover at some point during the journey down Workhouse Lane. This goes against the official narrative of how this crime was committed. Later on in the video, I'll be discussing a newspaper article which talks about soil samples taken from boots, the vehicle and the lane itself, which has been classified as unused evidence. I'll also give you my own thought process on how I piece together parts of the crime scene to validate my initial suspicions. So let's start with today's video. Now, the most obvious place to start with this video is with the official narrative of how Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were supposedly killed. Now, we're led to believe by not only the prosecution, but in documentaries and films which are shown on TV, that Tucker, Tate and Rolfe entered Workhouse Lane with an occupant in the rear of the Range Rover, a 4th passenger. The Range Rover itself travelled down the length of Workhouse Lane on December 6, 1995. When that Range Rover reaches the 5-bar locked gate, the rear occupant behind Craig Rolfe gets out of the vehicle in order to go and open this gate. During the time that the rear door is open, a gunman approaches from nearby bushes and executes Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. This crime was committed in a matter of seconds, minutes at most. Not one of the 3 deceased ever leave the Range Rover once it enters Workhouse Lane. So then how do we explain the presence of mud on the bottom of Tony Tucker's boots? Now, once we are faced with that following photograph of Tony Tucker's boots with mud on the bottom of them, the next question should be, do we have any transference from these boots into the inside of the Range Rover? If this was quite a fresh occurrence of Tucker being outside in the lane, you would imagine that that mud would have been wet to have stuck to Tucker's boots. It would have then been transferred into the front footwell of the Range Rover. Now, interestingly, when we take a look at the next photograph of the front footwell where Tucker is situated, we do have a stain here in the front footwell. This matches up in both colour and texture to that of the mud which is found on the bottom of Tucker's boots. Now, the presence of mud on his boots and in the front footwell shouldn't be enough to immediately make you believe that Tucker got out of the vehicle at any point during his journey down the lane. This mud may have been picked up from the first part of the journey in the Range Rover before they'd even reached Workhouse Lane itself. Now, the next port of call is to actually look at the crime scene as a whole. We need to look for any item or any vehicle which may have travelled down the whole length of the farm track so that we can see if any drying mud is present so that we can compare it with the mud that has dried on Tucker's boots and in the front footwell of the Range Rover. Well, luckily enough, we have the Range Rover which has travelled the full length of the farm track, and on the side wall of the Range Rover we have drying mud. Now, if we compare this mud with the mud which is found on Tucker's boots and is found in the front footwell of the Range Rover, we have a very credible match. Now, some people watching this video may believe that mud is just mud. It could have come from anywhere. But that's not quite the case, because mud varies from location to location, especially in clay content. It can dry at a certain speed, dry at a certain colour. And what we have here between the sidewall of the Range Rover, the outside of the vehicle, and what is found on the inside, as in the footwell and the soles of Tucker's boots, in my opinion, is a very close match to that of the mud found down the lane. Now, what I'm going to do for you next is read to you a newspaper article from the Express, which is dated May 2018. And in this article, John Womes, and that's Jack Womes' brother, so Jack Womes being one of the convicted men in this case, his brother actually appears in this article and makes mention of the mud and the soil samples being collected from the crime scene itself. I will read this article to you in its entirety, and I will make sure that I point out the part that discusses the mud when we get to it. Essex Boys murderers in new bid for freedom amid claims evidence was not disclosed. Two men convicted of the Essex Boys murders have launched a new appeal after a shed full of undisclosed evidence was allegedly uncovered. Michael Steele, 75, and Jack Womes, 56, were jailed for life in January 1998 after being found guilty of the Rettendon Range Rover murders of Essex drug barons Patrick Tate, 37, Tony Tucker, 38, and Craig Rolfe, 26. Their bodies were found in a Range Rover parked in a remote farm track in Rettendon Essex on the morning of December 7th, 1995. The slayings have been the subject of several British gangster feature films which have speculated about what actually happened. Womes from Brockford, Suffolk, and Steele of Great Bentley, Essex, were involved in drug deals with the murdered gangsters but have always denied killing them. The pair have launched a new bid for freedom with an application to the Criminal Cases Review Commission based on claims of non-disclosure of evidence before the trial. Police and Crown Prosecution Service non-disclosure of evidence is currently being looked at in an inquiry by MPs on the Justice Committee, after a series of rape prosecutions collapsed due to late disclosure of unused evidence that supported the defence's cases. Womes and Steele's prosecution was based around the word of Supergrass Darren Nichols, 49, another Essex Boys gang member who was placed into witness protection after claiming in court he was their getaway driver after the murders. It also centred on the phone records which placed Womes and Steele in the area and in contact with Tate in the run-up to the killings. Womes' brother John Womes, 56, from Suffolk, told the Sunday Express newly disclosed phone evidence formed part of the fresh action. He said, quote, "At the trial we wanted everything that was unused as evidence, but it turns out we were never given everything, and now we have got that. I'm 110% sure that the non-disclosure will take us to an immediate appeal." Mr. Womes said the new material could fill a shed or room of 10 metres by 8. He added, quote, "It includes everything, even soil samples from the scene and from boots and tyres. We are more than delighted. It is coming up to 23 years now, but I have said we will win, because I will fight to the death, and we are getting near the end." Solicitor David Wells of Wells Burkham, who is representing the pair, tweeted, "Jack Womes and Michael Steele, the so-called Essex Boys convicted of the Rettendon murders in 1998, have both today formally requested the CCRC to review their convictions based on significant non-disclosure." Now back to the article itself, it goes on to state the following. The CCRC has to accept the new application, but if no new evidence is contained, it could quickly be dismissed. The CCRC previously referred the case for appeal in 2004, but the court upheld the convictions. In the mid-2000s, the CCRC looked at another appeal, but did not refer the case to court. Then in 2015, another approach to the CCRC was rejected as a subsequent court bid to overturn that decision. Now, what I find most interesting about that article is John Womes talking about some of the unused evidence, some of the evidence he has which neither the public nor myself have ever seen. It's interesting he mentions the soil samples, not only the soil samples but samples taken from the boots and the tyres of that vehicle. Is he trying to tell us here that they did actually match? It showed that Tucker got outside the vehicle, therefore the official narrative of them simply driving down to the locked 5-bar gate and then being executed within seconds could simply not be true. Now, given the fact that the Range Rover has travelled the full length of Workhouse Lane and the mud that you see on that vehicle is most definitely from Workhouse Lane, the Range Rover is the biggest indicator that the mud that we see on Tony Tucker's boots may well have originated from Workhouse Lane. It is very similar in colour, in texture, and we know that that mud must have been wet on the bottom of Tucker's boots for it to have then transferred into the front footwell of that Range Rover. Now back to the point in hand, why would Tony Tucker have even got outside the vehicle? Does it even matter why he got out of the vehicle? Well, really, realistically, it doesn't matter why he was outside the vehicle. All we are looking for is evidence which casts doubt upon the official narrative used by the prosecution, and it's the same narrative which is being told in the films and recent documentaries. To be able to have any other credible reason or suspect in this case, you need to first be able to disprove the official narrative which convicted Michael Steele and Jack Womes. Now, what we can say for certain is that we have two eyewitness accounts, one from Rebecca Carr and one from the farmer's wife, Frances Theobald, that state a Range Rover matching that description, along with a white vehicle, pulling off of Main Road into White House Farm car park. These two vehicles don't stop in the car park, they simply do a big loop and then enter back onto the main road the way they had just come from. That is in the direction of where this small farm track is located. Did they overshoot the lane? Did Tucker then get out of the vehicle at the entrance to Workhouse Lane to make sure that they were in the right direction? Did Tucker simply get out of the Range Rover to take a phone call or have a piss in the bushes? It doesn't actually matter why he got out of the vehicle. All we are looking for is something which can cast reasonable doubt on the official narrative that these three individuals simply drove to the end of Workhouse Lane to the locked 5-bar gate and were executed within seconds. I believe if these soil samples come back as positive between the boots of Tucker and the tyres of the Range Rover, we have an answer. They were either there for a little bit longer or a lot longer than we were ever told, or there was another reason as to why Tucker exited the Range Rover. Now, there are a few things that I can be fairly certain of, and one of those is that Tucker didn't exit the Range Rover when it reached its final stationary position. What gives me that impression is when we look at the outside of Tucker's door, we do have a footprint here, but it's facing in the wrong direction. This was more than likely left by the gunman. We also have a large amount of snow and no other footprints visible. We must remember that Tucker would have needed to have walked in one of the tracks to have got that mud on the bottom of his shoes or boots in the first place. In my opinion, Tucker has more than likely got out of the lane at the start of Workhouse Lane or maybe on the first bend to make sure that he's in the right lane. If we also take a look at the side of Tucker's door when it reaches its final stationary position, we can see that it's quite a tight squeeze. There's a lot of vegetation. It wouldn't be very feasible for Tucker to have got out in that location and left no footprints. Another couple of things that I can be fairly certain about regarding Tony Tucker exiting the vehicle is that he wouldn't have spent a great deal of time outside of that Range Rover, and he certainly wouldn't have been chased by anyone. Now, the reason I have that opinion is because the bottom of his jeans remain largely clean. If he was being chased by anyone or if he had covered a long distance on foot, you would have expected to have seen that mud splash up from the boots to the bottom of those jeans. But as you can see here, those jeans remain largely clean. So to summarise, without actually seeing the soil sample results myself, I can't be 100% convinced that the mud found on Tucker's boots definitely originated from Workhouse Lane. But in my opinion, we certainly have a lot of factors here pointing towards that being a distinct possibility. Does it matter if Tucker even got out the vehicle at all? In my opinion, yes it does, because we have an official narrative put forward not only by Darren Nichols, but by the prosecution in this case, which claims that the Range Rover simply turned off of Main Road, it travelled the full length of Workhouse Lane with these three occupants inside, and then they were simply executed. If Tucker at some stage got out of that vehicle for however long, it would mean that the official narrative was incorrect. The mother of murdered Pat Tate has claimed that her son was no drugs baron and died trying to protect his friend targeted for a revenge killing. Pat, 37, of Gordon Road, Basildon, was one of the trio found shot dead in a Range Rover in Rettendon early on Thursday, December the 7th. They were believed to have been lured to their deaths by a rival gang. But his mother Marie, 56, said the 6'3", 18-stone heavyweight had only attended the risky undercover meeting to support his pal Tony Tucker. She is convinced Tony, 38, of High Road Fobbing, and the other victim Craig Rolfe, 26, of Calshot Avenue, Chafford 100, were taken out by drugs rivals in a revenge attack for the drugs death of Kevin Whitaker in November 1994. She is emphatic that her son was not involved in that. Chelmsford coroner Dr. Malcolm Weir recorded an open verdict into Kevin's death after his drugged body was found in a ditch in Dunton, but his parents always claimed he must have been murdered by being made to take an overdose. Kevin's father Bert said, quote, "We believe Rolfe and Tucker were involved, but nobody came forward to say how it happened. Tucker was definitely at the inquest and Craig Rolfe had a warrant served on him to attend. He said Rolfe denied at the inquest that he knew Kevin, but was shown phone bills proving that his number had been rung from Kevin's house. And he added, quote, "We heard there was a contract out on Rolfe and Tucker. but how and if they did this to Kevin, we don't know. The toxicologist told us he didn't know how it wasn't a murder verdict at the inquest because of the amount of lignocaine, one of the drugs involved. Kevin was anti-needles, he hated them. Somebody administered this, but we don't know how or why. Mrs. Tate alleged that Kevin was caught up in a deal with a Romford drugs gang involving £60,000 worth of cannabis, for which he would have been paid just £2,000. But she claimed Craig and Tony wanted to stop Kevin talking. She said they injected him with a substance nicknamed Special K, a paralysing drug used on horses. She said, quote, "This paralysed his body but not his brain. They followed it up with what they told him was a line of cocaine which completely finished him off. He was only used to smoking bits of cannabis." Mrs. Tate said Pat was in hospital at the time. Craig Rolfe and Tony Tucker told him about it and thought it was funny. But Pat was in hospital after an attempt on his own life by someone else. He was shot while out on parole from an earlier prison sentence, and he forfeited that freedom after a nurse found a gun under his bed and he was jailed again. He had only been out of prison 5 weeks when he was killed. Mrs. Tate said, "People keep saying that he was a drugs baron, but he wasn't. He was no angel, but he wasn't one of the people that goes round to nightclubs selling e-tablets. Pat was warned about going to that meeting in Rettendon, but he went to protect Tony. Because he was such a big man, he thought that nothing could happen to him. He and Tony idolised each other." A total of 40 officers are currently working on the case to find the triple murderer. Detective Superintendent Ivan Dibley, who is leading the inquiry, said, "We would be interested to hear from Mrs. Tate if she has information she feels would be of use to our inquiries." The following newspaper article is from the 1st of March 1996 with the headline, "Drug War Alert." An all-out gang war to settle control of the drug trade in South Essex was the grim prospect portrayed by police bosses for TV viewers at the weekend. The dire warning came on Sunday's London weekend television programme London Tonight, which showed violence among the drug barons of South Essex spiralling out of control. Essex police have now confirmed that the battle against the drug trade has become their top priority. According to police, more murder and mutilation in answer to the assassination of Basildon gangsters Pat Tate, Craig Rolfe and Tony Tucker at Rettendon last December is expected soon. Superintendent Ivan Dibley, who is leading the inquiry into the Rettendon shooting, said, "When 3 people of this calibre are murdered, there will be no shortage of people wanting to take their place. Violent reprisals from the friends of the deceased or from someone close to one of those murdered must be expected." Also screened was the horrific tale of drugs, torture and extortion surrounding recently jailed Jason Vella and his Basildon and Tilbury-based gang. An Essex police spokesman said, quote, "The arrest of drug traffickers is one of our key objectives. We are holding a major conference on March the 20th with other agencies, including educationalists and the probation service, to see how we can tackle the drugs problem." The following newspaper article was from the 7th of March 1996 with the headline, "The Hit." They have a new parlour game in the Essex village of Rettendon, and no one plays it better than Peter Theobald and his wife Frances. Murder Mystery is a game of mental gymnastics, its aim to formulate a theory, necessarily incredible, to weave the few known facts into a complete account of what happened 300 yards from their living room. The Theobalds from Farming Stock were at it again the other night over tea and walnut cake. He wondered why there was so little mess when he made his discovery on an icy winter's morning. She was struggling to explain how they could have driven to the remote spot behind their White House farm during the evening rush hour as police supposed, and why nobody had seen them as they waited for several minutes before completing the right turn in their Range Rover. Quote, "Perhaps they were already dead," she suggested, returning to one of her favourite themes. There were 3 bodies, victims of a shotgun assassin as they sat in the lane. Craig Rolfe, 26, was in the driver's seat. His boss, Tony Tucker, 38, friend to the stars, was in the front passenger seat, and in the back was Tucker's boyhood friend, Pat Tate. It was a fearsome crime, except many locals thought good riddance to drugs rubbish. They were drug dealers, but none was Mr. Big, even in Essex. They were speculating at the spanking new police station in South Woodham Ferrers. It has a lovely new incident room, and as the officers moved out after investigating the death of teenager Leah Betts, it seemed only right Ivan Dibley and his squad of 40 should move in. The station was officially opened 3 weeks after their murder inquiry got underway. The forum for a classic detective story. Some detectives believed the gunman was in the Range Rover with his victims. His 3-shot pump-action 12-bore shotgun, a little sawn off perhaps, picked up at the murder spot as he clambered out to open a gate. Others think he stepped out of the shadows after the Range Rover's occupants were lured to Workhouse Lane, regular home to courting couples. Others still favour a hybrid. The gunman was indeed waiting, but the man who ordered the murders had hired a professional hitman and arrived with the others in the back seat, a trusted colleague or friend. They died in under 2 seconds, and only one, Tate, seemed to know anything about it. How much, as almost everything in this case, is conjecture. A post-mortem examination highlighted a combination in his bloodstream of heroin, cocaine and cannabis. He was, after all, an 18-stone bodybuilder. A room darkened as he entered it, one associate was to remark. There were, in the first few weeks, an array of flowers left at the scene, mysteriously dropped by unseen hands in the dead of night. One paid tribute to the man on the back seat, who took 2 shots to his head and 1 in the stomach. A wonderful man, it read. Poison did this to you. Nearly 3 months on, there are no more flowers. Ivan Dibley, 50, one of 3 detective superintendents in Essex, was on a day off on December the 7th last year. He was breakfasting at home in Chelmsford when the call came just before 8:30 a.m. He reacted calmly, going off to the shops to do his early morning chores before taking over the investigation. He had headed more than 25 murder investigations in the previous 5 years. It rankled that 2 remained unsolved. But 1995 had been a good year. He had cleared up 10 murders in as many months. He had never headed a triple murder inquiry before. It dawned on him that this, his biggest case, was to be his last. He was retiring at the end of April after 32 years in the force. Only 30 minutes had elapsed since Ken Jiggins, 47, arrived at Peter Theobald's door, ready to help his friend feed the 800 pheasants kept in fields at the 130-acre farm. Theobald ran a shooting range, and the birds had to be fed twice a day. Jiggins was a bricklayer, and the frost was too severe to work that day. They skipped tea, and Theobald started up the Land Rover, scraping thick ice from its windows. It had begun snowing about 4 p.m. the previous day, and continued into the early hours when frost had set in. They drove across the field, maybe 300 yards, and turned left into Workhouse Lane. There, in front of a locked gate leading to an angler's carp pond and the shooting area, was a metallic blue Range Rover. Its windows, despite the ice, were clear, and the pair could see 2 men in the front seats. They looked asleep, and Jiggins jumped out to ask them to move aside. Theobald was wondering if they were poachers, when Jiggins, who had tapped on the driver's window, shouted out, "There are 2 dead men here." He used his mobile phone to alert the police, while Theobald went to check. As well as the 2 in the front, he saw another man dead in the back, slumped across the seat. He looked more closely at the driver, still with his hands on the steering wheel, and, he later learned, his foot on the brake. There was a round 2-inch entry wound behind his ear, exiting out of his mouth. Familiar with firearms, Theobald was astonished to learn that the men had been slain by a shotgun, and that each had 2 wounds to the head. There was some blood seeping from the Range Rover, but nothing like the mess he would have expected. His favoured murder mystery scenario was to posit a killer in the back seat, shooting the men in the front from 6 inches with the rifle pointing down. But that left his fellow players wondering what his backseat companion was doing as the shots were fired. Maybe he thought he was in on the hit, or perhaps he was too drugged to react. Rolfe, a father of a 7-year-old daughter, was the first to die, police believe. A small-time hood, he was the driver, and the automatic gear shift was still switched to drive. The ignition was off, but said Dibley he looked as if he had pulled up at a set of traffic lights. Alongside him was his boss Tucker, minder to ex-WBC super middleweight champion Nigel Benn. He ran a lucrative security agency for clubs around Essex and East London and pocketed maybe £1,500 a week. Like the others, he had a fine lifestyle, living in a £250,000 home and driving fancy cars. He was like scores in Essex in the drugs business, a wholesaler who never dirtied his hands. He was big in Basildon, but hardly serious enough to merit such special treatment. His bouncer business gave him the outlets, and Rolfe, who had a cocaine problem, was a trusted gopher, no more. Tate, who had a 2-year-old son, was out of prison for no more than 6 weeks when he died. He had a much more serious criminal record than the others, including convictions for drug offences and armed robbery. He had once escaped from the courthouse at Billericay, making off on a motorcycle driven by an accomplice. Heading for Spain, he made the mistake of visiting Gibraltar and was extradited back. He was out of prison on parole and enjoying a shave when the gunman came. He threw a brick through the window and as Tate reacted, fired once. It hit Tate in the arm and he was taken to hospital. Staff discovered his secret stash of drugs and his handgun beneath his pillow. Tate's licence was revoked and he was returned to prison. Tucker, a friend from childhood, looked after his second-hand car business. One man questioned over that attack was Stephen Ellis. He raced off to a new identity in the West Country in apparent fear of reprisal and took to wearing body armour. He popped up a few days after the triple murder with a suspiciously graphic account of how they died. The trio had been given a choice: death by a single shot or through hacking, bit by bit. Tucker and Tate had messed their trousers. Great tale, little of it true. When Tate had come out of prison, Tucker wanted to give him a place in his drugs organisation, more of a franchise operation than an independent outfit. But as even his mother admits, Tate was a liability. Tucker and Rolfe were hardly adverse to beating up those who crossed them, but Tate, a violent man driven crazy by drugs, was out of control. The night before he died, he telephoned the London pizza company at Basildon. He told Roger Ryle, 21, the manager, he wanted a specially made pizza with 4 different toppings on each quarter. Ryle was busy and he was annoyed at the caller's attitude. He hung up. Tate was there within minutes. He picked up the till, smashed it against a wall. He punched Ryle, then smashed his head into a glass plate on the sink. Ryle, like others crossed by the trio, declined to press charges. After the murders, the rumours flew. One suggestion was they were trying to muscle in on someone else's patch. Another had them heavily in debt. And a third indicated they had been double-crossed after hiring a £20,000 hitman to take out a rival drugs dealer. There was one claim that it was a revenge attack for Leah Bett's death, with Tucker probably the ultimate dealer. And another which made Dibley chuckle, quote, "There are members of the public who even think the police did it. Bollocks. None of the dead men's families is talking. They have a good idea. But they are afraid." Dibley, with a team of 15 detectives, says, quote, "The public aren't too happy either about so much time being spent on such lowlife. But my job isn't to moralise. The killers have to be caught. There is to be no tit for tat yet, and that has surprised me a little. But some intelligence indicates the families are keen to give us a chance to sort it out." He has 5 more weeks to solve the case. There is no concrete evidence to say whether the killer travelled in the 7-year-old Range Rover bought by Rolfe 2 weeks earlier or appeared at the scene. Nor is it certain whether he had an accomplice or a getaway car, nor whether he was a professional hitman. But Dibley has a best guess scenario. He knows the 3 men were planning to go for a meal that night with girlfriends to a Basildon restaurant. Kick-off was to be 8 p.m. A telephone call came in the late afternoon. Both Tucker and Tate were still holding their mobile phones when they died. But Dibley believes the call came in from a public telephone the trio used to circumvent itemised bills. It was someone they trusted, summoning them to a meeting. They didn't think they would be long. He has no idea why Workhouse Lane was the meeting place or whether it was familiar to them. Although quiet, it was far from deserted. But there is a pond nearby, and often drug smugglers hid stashes underwater. None was armed when discovered, not even Tate, who went almost everywhere with a gun. Dibley believes it unlikely guns were taken from them, so they trusted whoever was behind the killings. The gunman didn't pick up the 8 spent cartridges. It was dark and would have taken too long. He fired off 3 shots quickly, killing Rolfe, then Tucker. They would have known nothing. Tate might have reacted and the first shot to hit him was probably the one through his abdomen. The gunman reloaded twice. Each was hit twice in the head, although probably already dead. Tate took an extra shot. Quote, "The fact that he reloaded twice when his victims were already dead means it was done in an act of vengeance," says Dibley. The motive was Tate. Increasingly out of control, Tucker had tried to give him a place in his drugs hierarchy. That, allied to Tate's behaviour, had infuriated others. Tucker and Rolfe, according to this version, were taken out incidentally, but police in Essex will shortly reopen their investigation into the death of Kevin Whitaker, 28, who died of an apparent overdose in November 1994. He was a drug courier, an associate of Rolfe. His parents and Tate's mother believe he was murdered over a drug debt. His killers, Tucker and Rolfe. Tate's mother, Marie, said her son told her about it when she visited him in hospital after he was shot. Whitaker, whose parents were horrified to discover his link with drugs, disappeared from their home on November 17, 1994. He had brought round his 6-month-old son Lewis, but had gone out when Rolfe called him for the umpteenth time. Almost 30 hours later, police arrived on the Basildon doorstep of Bert and Joan Whitaker to tell them their son had been found, dumped by the roadside. That Whitaker had died from a drug overdose there was no doubt. Police, seeing needle marks on his right arm, assumed at first he was an addict. They believed his death might be suicide, and other drug users had moved his body, terrified the police might prosecute them for drugs offences. There was an inquest at Chelmsford a year ago. Rolfe called to give evidence, at first denied knowing Whitaker, then admitted he had called him when confronted with itemised phone bills. Quote, "We realised there was more to our son's death," said Joan Whitaker, 64, and then Mrs Tate, after the deaths, claimed Tucker and Rolfe had injected Whitaker in the groin with a paralysing drug often used on horses known as Special K. The victim is powerless but conscious. Whitaker was then injected with lignocaine and died. Mrs Tate thinks Whitaker's friends avenged his death. Her son was the innocent party. But Whitaker was small fry, and although police now believe Rolfe and Tucker murdered him, they feel it had nothing to do with last December's events at Workhouse Lane. Dibley, who remains strangely bullish, has made one arrest. A 27-year-old decorator from South London was held in a joint operation with Scotland Yard and was charged with firearms offences. He is remanded in custody, and he said, quote, "We're not frustrated. You only get frustrated when there's no work to do, and there's plenty to be done. I'm happy with how our inquiry is proceeding, and I'm hopeful of arrest before I retire. It's how I'd want to end a 32-year career."
You have 26 messages.
Hi Tony, this is Holmes Spalding. Please ring Derek Tyler on leads 0113 284 3553. Thank you.
Hi, I don't know if you're there. This ring up about the wages. Can you give me a ring at home? Okay, cheers, bye.
Hi, it's only me yet again. I just thought I'd ring you. Can you ring me as soon as you can? Bye. Hi, it's Mary. Can you ring me? It's really important. I need to. Really important. Now. Thanks. Bye. Time, can you ring me when you get in, please? Bye. Hi, Tony, it's only Mary. Can you give us a ring when you get back or when you read your messages? Bye.
Tony's Colton, can you give us a ring at Lynn's? Cheers, mate.
Tom, can you ring us back if he's dead? What's else to say? We're worried. Will you ring us straight back as soon as you can?
Tony, it's Jane and Ronnie here. Can you give us a call, please? 01303 245977 as soon as possible.
Oh, Tony, it's Pete. Your mum's been after your house telephone number. Can you ring her and let her know what it is? See you later.
Hello, Tom. Could you ring me? It's Bill.
later. Bye.
Hello, Tom. Give us a ring, mate. It's Mickey. Hello, Tom. Give us a ring, mate. Mickey.
Hi, anyway, Tom, when you listen to messages, could you ring me, please? So I was sick at the moment. I'll speak to you later. Bye. Hi, it's only me. Time's nearly 2:05, still haven't heard from you. Can you just give us a ring, please, let us know you're alright? Because at the moment I think you're dead. You just said on the telly that there's 3 men in Range Rover. I think it's you. Bye.
Hello, Tone. It's Ian. Can you give us a ring, please?
Hi, only me. The time's now 1:45. I still haven't heard from you. Can you just give me a ring, please? My mum to let me know that you're alright. Alright, speak to you later. Bye. Hi, me. Time's now 11:15. I've just got home from stables. I was going to say, just thought I'd give you a ring because I haven't heard from you. You're either alright or you're not. I wouldn't know really. Just phone's off. Alright then. So I'll try and catch up with you later on. Bye.
Yeah, can you ring Bernie, please?
Tony, hi, it's Portugal here. It's 9 o'clock. Can you delay the pickup of your equipment until about, say, about 12 o'clock today? Because we're going to be working on it until then. It's going to be a couple of hours. I'll speak to you later. I'm at work. 515-6644. Cheerio.
Hello, babe. It's Maggie. So ring again in a minute. Bye. Hi, Tony, it's Mary. Just to let you know, Chris is home, so you're going to ring up about Willowbrook. He's at home with me. Speak to you soon. Bye. Bye, Chris. Ring and let me know how you're getting on. I'm all ready now. Bye. Hi, babe and mate. Can you give me a ring round the flat what I used to be? Remember 557-679. Yes, ring straight away, yeah? Right, speak to you in a minute. If not, come round my other flat. I'm around Drive at the moment, but come round the flat. I'll be here for the next about 15 minutes. Right then, speak to you in a minute. Bye.